Hello everyone, I'm Austin Bruce, and welcome back to Outside the Hash Marks. Now in the previous video, I discussed the 12-team playoff format and the pros and cons that come with it. And in that video, I also brought up how I had curated my own model, and today I'm going to be looking through that model. Now before we get into my playoff model that I have curated, I would like to first focus on some of the cons that come with the 12-team playoff format that we're going to get in 2024. And one of the biggest ones to me, at least, is the fact that the top four conference champions each receive a bye. Now, there's nothing wrong with the byes themselves. The problem is that not every conference champion deserves a bye. Because, for example, you could have a conference champion go 10-3 and get a bye over a team that went 12-1 and lost in their conference championship game, which just doesn't seem fair in any way, shape, or form. Both teams played the same amount of games. The other main problem that comes with the 12-team playoff format is the fact that it's still kind of exclusive. Now, this has already been shown through reports of the conferences discussing a potential 14-team playoff format, but it still only allows for one group of 5 representative. And as the name implies, there's 5 conferences represented by one bid, which just isn't fair in a sense. The group of 5 conferences are obviously not on the same level as the power conferences, but giving them just one bid just feels like a slap to the face. With that out of the way, let's move on to my model. The model I've curated expands on the 12-team playoff model and actually doubles the field to 24. Now, if that number sounds familiar, it's actually the number of teams included in the FCS playoffs, which is what heavily inspired my own curated model. Now, in the FCS playoffs, 10 conferences receive automatic bids, and then there are 14 at-large teams selected based on various criteria. The top 8 teams are selected through a series of votes, and the remaining field is filled out by geography based on proximity to each of the teams and each of the top 8 seeds. As for my 24-team college football playoff model, the bid breakdown is very similar to the FCS model, with the Pac-12 likely facing extinction barring a reverse merger of some kind. The bids would be assigned to each of the 9 remaining conferences as automatic bids, and then you would have 15 at-large teams. As for the location of the playoffs, the first and second round would be played on campus sites, and the quarterfinals onwards would be played at New Year's Six bowl games and a neutral site for the national championship, which will follow the 12-team playoff format. This is where the soon-to-be 12-team playoff format and my proposed 24-team playoff format begin to diverge. The top 8 teams would receive byes in the 24-team playoff format, with the top 8 being selected via the CFP rankings. The CFP rankings would also determine the 15 at-large teams. All of this together would help determine the matchups, with the only exception to the rule being to avoid potential rematches in the first round. I have used the rankings from last season to help illustrate what a 24-team playoff could look like. Of course, not every model is perfect. There is no perfect model when it comes to college football. There's always going to be someone that complains, but let's focus on the pros of this first. I think the most obvious pro that comes out of all this is there's more football. Who doesn't love more football? But on a serious note, one of the bigger pros is that there would be more inclusion. Every conference would get represented by at least one team. And honestly, I feel like that's what everyone's trying to strive for. Get more teams included so that everyone gets a fair shot to compete for a national championship. This is also a win-win for the power conferences because they would also get what they want. They would get more money via more playoff teams and having more games being played. There are a few notable cons to this model though. Perhaps one of the biggest ones is that the model doesn't give the automatic qualifiers home field advantage. Now, this would seem like a problem, except this also happens in the 12-team playoff format. With one of the conference champions not receiving a bye in the 12-team playoff format, that puts that remaining champion at risk of being on the road in round 1. Another con is the length of the season. This has been brought up with the 12-team playoff format, and it would almost certainly be brought up in a hypothetical 24-team playoff format. With most teams that play in the FCS level playing 12 games and teams that play in conference championships playing in 13 games, a 24-team playoff format could add up to 5 more games should a team advance all the way to the national championship from the first round. Of course, a 24-team playoff format also raises the question as to whether 24 teams is too much for one playoff. And I'd like to respond to that by saying that the FBS already has 40 plus bowl games in the postseason, with many of those being considered meaningless or worthless due to players opting out, teams not wanting to be there, so on and so forth. That also brings up another point as to whether we would even still have bowl games in the age of a 24-team playoff. Bowl games could lose all remaining importance, and that would be detrimental to revenue for some conferences, including the Group of 5 conferences. But I want to know your thoughts on this. Is the 24-team playoff model the answer to what we've been looking for? Let me know in the comments down below. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on any of my future videos. And don't forget to keep the college football flame burning.